Across the country, employers are facing workforce shortages, changing skill demands, and real questions about how to grow in a competitive economy. Here in Maine, we're not just talking about those challenges, we're exploring ideas and partnerships that will shape what comes next. I'm Dan Belyea. I lead the Harold Alphons Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce, a program of the Maine Community College System. And welcome to Maine Ideas. Our podcast focuses on workforce, business, innovation, and brings together leaders who share what's working and how Maine and the nation continue to grow. So let's get comfortable, stay curious, and let's explore what's possible together. Today's conversation focuses on the future of Maine's construction workforce and partnerships needed to meet the growing demand. Kelly Flagg is the Executive Director of the Associated General Contractors of Maine, the statewide organization representing commercial construction contractors, suppliers, and service providers. In this episode, we'll talk about Maine's urgent infrastructure and workforce needs, the misconceptions around careers in construction, and how stronger connections among industry, education, and community partners help build a more skilled, inclusive, and sustainable pipeline for the future. Kelly, it's so good to see you and thank you for joining us. I want to jump right in. Tell us about AGC Maine.
Excellent. Happy to. Thanks for having me, Dan. I'm really excited to be here for this conversation. AGC Maine is a statewide organization representing commercial and industrial contractors and related businesses and organizations. So the hub, if you will, for all large commercial, large and small, actually, commercial contractors, service providers, and suppliers. And our organization does a number of things. We work to connect industry to each other, as well as work as a liaison to the State House and our legislative partners and other education partners as well. And then the third thing we do is we're very heavily involved in workforce development and training the future construction teams of Maine.
That's so awesome. So, what brought you into this industry?
Like most people in construction, I landed here by accident and then I fell in love. Early in my career, which seems completely unrelated, I was working in the fitness world, and the building that our fitness facility was housed in caught on fire. So that was not a great experience, but it was the first time I got to see real true construction in action. We had very significant damage to that building, and I had the experience of rebuilding and attempting to reopen that facility in the shortest possible time frame, all while trying to maintain our business throughout that process. And so I wasn't directly responsible for construction. We had a GC who handled that, but I was responsible for handling the finances and all of the things that go on outside of that construction project. And it's really interesting. I found myself very intrigued by it. It was one of the harder times of my young life. Obviously, one day I had one job and the next day my job was very different, but I found it fascinating, and a couple years later decided to leave the fitness industry and work with my husband at the time, who had a small landscape installation. We did residential hardscape, softscape, and drainage, and I decided to move on and work with him in the construction industry. So I did that for quite some time before I landed in commercial construction in 2011. And the rest is history, honestly. I love the complexity of large projects. I love the people that work on those projects. And for me, it always felt like I knew a secret. Once you've been behind the fence where it says authorized personnel only, it's this really cool secret of all of the things that have to happen for our buildings and our roads and our bridges to be built. That's a short version of the 25 years that got me here.
That's so awesome. And you really segued me into this next piece. Construction and the industry is so important here in Maine with the demands for housing, the demands for commercial spaces, and Maine's economy and Maine's communities desperately need the work that you're doing. Tell us more about what you're doing currently that's so important for Maine's economy and communities.
Yeah, there's a lot. The first thing is we are always actively engaged with our legislators and looking at how do we make sure that our state is prepared for the needs of the future. And that might mean transportation infrastructure, the maintenance and repair of our schools, energy infrastructure for the future. There's so many things that our industry touches, right? It's not just one aspect, but really the infrastructure of our state and therefore the economic health of our state are a big part of what we're focused on. And then the second piece is who are the people that are going to do that work? And we hear about workforce all the time and the workforce shortages all the time, but AGC has been actively engaged in developing the future workforce, developing the necessary partnerships to create that pipeline so that when that work is available and when the state needs us, we're ready for it.
Yeah, and it's such an important piece, and you really started touching upon the pressing need. So, what is the pressing need facing Maine's construction industry today?
There's a couple of things. One, I always have to, when we're talking about construction in Maine, I think there's always private projects, just to say that right out loud. There's always private investment in construction, and that is always something that's happening. But the reality is, there's also a lot of public need for infrastructure investment. And one of the things that I think is really pressing for our state right now is making sure that we have the funding to take good care of our roads, making sure we have the money available to take good care of our schools where our children go every day, and making sure we're thinking about what does our energy future look like. There's also always a lot of talk about energy in Maine and energy costs in Maine and our infrastructure. And so those things are currently and ongoing pressing issue is how do we make sure we're taking care of those things? And I'm going to touch on both of the things we talked about before. Also, who's going to build them and where do we find those people? How do we train those people? I've been saying this for a really long time. We have known that we had an aging workforce in Maine for many years. I think we're going on decades now that we've been having the conversation of what happens when the baby boomer generation who was brought up in the trades retire and this next generation has maybe had a different focus, and how do we backfill those holes that are going to be left when those tradespeople choose to retire? And of course, in the middle, nobody anticipated that we would have a pandemic that sped up that process. But now we have this perfect storm, right? So you have naturally aging leadership in the trades. Then you insert a pandemic that created accelerated retirement for a group of people. And then we have increased needs in construction infrastructure. When you put those three things together, even though our construction workforce is growing, the need for the construction workforce is also growing. And so it creates this little bit of a treadmill effect in terms of backfilling those positions. And so that's been one of our major priorities at AGC for at least the last 5 years. And I know you and I are going to talk more about what that looks like as we go on today, but that's been a very large part of our focus for the most recent history.
Yeah, and you're talking the aging population has such a stressor on what's happening in Maine. What are the misconceptions about careers in construction?
Ooh, there's a lot. But I think one of the biggest things when I think about communicating what a career in construction looks like, one of the things I always say is that construction is not the last choice or last resort for a career. It doesn't have to be. And we used to hear sometimes people would say it's what you did if you didn't go to college. I had no other choice, the truth is that construction is incredibly important, and careers within construction are a broad range of different opportunities. Yes, you can enter with literally zero experience and we will train you to do a job, and by the time you complete an apprenticeship training program, you will be making a very livable wage. I think that's an important thing to communicate, right? That you can work with your hands and choose to do this and choose to take a non-traditional pathway and still end up in a very strong financial position to stay here, to own a home, to raise a family, and to do all of those things. There are many other options too, though. When we talk about construction, we're not only talking about craft workers. There There are folks who handle accounting in construction. There are the people who manage the projects. There are people who audit safety. And then there are your managers and your leaders within the industry. So I think when I'm talking about careers in construction, I'm talking about so much more than what I think people see on the surface. And I feel like it's really important to show people what that really truly looks like. And if we go back to the thing I had said when we were talking about my own career, I was 31 the first time I ever stepped foot behind the fence of a commercial construction project. So the first time I ever really saw a large, complicated commercial construction project. And it's been part of our mission to show people that earlier so that if they feel that same passion or same interest, that they have the option to make that career choice sooner as opposed to later. Because most people don't ever get to see that, right? We drive by and we see people working on the side of the road, or we drive by and we see buildings going up, but we don't see the intricate nature of what's happening on those projects.
Yeah, and I appreciate you talking about those career pathways because in many cases, the sky's the limit for individuals who want to earn really high wages and grow within these companies. Let's pivot a little bit to workforce initiatives. You folks have been involved in many partnerships, training opportunities, and industry collaborations. Tell us more about the partnerships that you've been involved in.
Oh, a great thing to talk about right now. I thoroughly believe that workforce development shouldn't happen in a vacuum, right? There's a lot of organizations out there trying to do similar work and trying to support similar populations. And most recently, I'll highlight one that you and I are involved in together, which is our partnership with Harold Alphon Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce and the Maine Community Colleges. I think when we're talking about construction, again, we have the opportunity to take a non-traditional pathway and go for an apprenticeship program where you start with no skill base and we will teach you and train you. There's still related technical instruction required for that pathway, right? The nice thing is you're working and gaining education at the same time. I love that partnership with the community colleges because it gives that opportunity for workforce friendly training, meaning you can work and you can take a certificate program here or there, or you can receive your related technical instruction. And AGC provides some of that. The community colleges provide some of that. There are other training facilities that provide some of that. But I think it's important that we build that infrastructure, that we show someone you can enter here, and these are all the options. Some of the other partnerships that we look at is then what happens with that person as they walk down that path. If we're looking at this as if it's a map, they may complete an apprenticeship and be happy to stay where they are, but then maybe they decide they want to be a project manager, and that might lead to a degree program within a community college or an associate's degree, or perhaps they even end up at the University of Maine in a construction engineering program. I think we have to all work together and realize that the goal is to find the right path for the individual. And for us, this partnership we've had with you all has been really important because it does give everyone an entry point. It says, okay, I want commercial construction. I'm going to go to AGC, and then AGC can say, walk in this door, and these are your pathway options. Couple of other great partnerships that we've been working on when we think about the future is how do we talk to people younger and younger? How do we talk to youth before they graduate from high school without a plan? And one of our focuses very early on, and it was really 2022 that we started this process, was we said we need to get to students in their between their sophomore and junior year, or between their junior and senior year of high school, where traditionally guidance counselors have focused very heavily on what's your pathway to college and how do we celebrate the students and for making a different decision if that's what's right for them. The data at that time was that 30% of high school students on their graduation day had no idea what their plan was after graduation. And for those students, I wanted to make sure they saw that they had an option. that they had an option for a pathway that may look different than their friends. And we then partnered with career technical education. So we're partnered with the career and technical education programs. We actually work right now with 17 either CTE programs or high schools across the state. My goal in the long term is to work with all of them to provide them that direct pathway into a construction career. And then one other sort of unique program that we're running right now, it's a little on the smaller side, but has a lot of potential, is we're working with the reentry community. We have a partnership with the Maine State Prison System and the Maine Women's Reentry Center in Windham. And we are running pre-apprenticeship programs that bring those folks through the same training as we would do with youth or adults, but we have more wraparound services. They have more support in terms of how do I transition into a safe and sober living facility? How do I regain my driver's license? How do I make sure I can get to work while I'm trying to figure out those things? And that is a much expanded partnership. There's a lot more people involved in supporting those folks, but we really are looking at where are all of the potential people that could work in construction? How do we bring them all into the pipeline and how do we make sure they all get what they need to end up somewhere successful at the end?
Yeah, and you're just touching upon that so important. The younger population in the pipeline of 5,000 high school students that not moving on to further education or training and tapping our CTE partners and our folks, the Department of Corrections and the recovery community is such an important piece. It's so good to hear the great work happening around that. Give us a little more information about the work that you folks have been doing to create a more welcoming and inclusive workplace.
Yeah, I think it's part of our nature. So AGC functions under a program called the Culture of Care model, and that is a model that helps our companies that are part of AGC just understand the needs of the different people that may be coming into industry. And maybe traditionally, if we were talking 10, 15, 20 years ago, construction was viewed in a particular way. And it has been a big part of our mission through this work to change the vision of who has a place in construction. And we're starting to see now, specifically speaking of women in the trades, we're starting to see 30 to 40% female applications in our construction immersion programs. And we continue to feature those individuals in our marketing just to show there is a place for you here. But I really believe that if you have a desire to be in a commercial construction environment, there's a place for you somewhere. And it isn't always the same place for every individual. And because of that belief, we've also worked really closely with Maine Vocational Rehab. We've had students who are part of the Voc Rehab program go through our pre-apprenticeship. And it's really a matter of just making sure that the individual is matched with the right company and the right job for what their skills and abilities are or what their aptitudes are. So I always tell people, don't discount yourself from this program. We just need to help figure out what's the right pathway for you.
It's such an important piece to get that pipeline bigger, wider, and create that tent for everyone. Let's look forward to the next 3 to 5 years. What do you think? What are you seeing as trends that will shape the Maine construction industry?
I think the work that we're doing now in workforce development is going to have a significant impact. I hope that we will see continued strengthening of the partnerships that we're building right now. I think about, I'll reference again our partnership with the community colleges. It's really been exciting to work in this partnership where we can bring the voice of industry into education and have that open dialogue where education is producing or providing the things the industry needs. And we're starting to see that in the CTE level as well. I hope that continues to grow. And as we continue down that path together, I'd love to see that just continue to be more integrated, right? For industry to say, this is what we need for our people to look like. These are the skills we need. This is the training we need. And for us to continue to see that be available. I also think we're going to continue to see construction become more sophisticated. So I think for those who are interested in technology, I always love to say for students who love video games, I think there's going to be more opportunity for that in construction as we see more technology use. We see more use of AI, more use of simulation. There's just so much happening, and it's happening so fast that our industry and the way we build things and the way we use technology is changing all the time. I think it creates some really interesting, unique opportunities for those that are interested in learning more and entering the industry.
What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received? And there may be a couple of those because you've had such an interesting career.
I've had lots of advice, most of which was needed. But one of the things that I share a lot is very early on, one of my mentors said that if you really truly want to be a leader in your career or in your life, that you have to become comfortable with conflict and you have to become comfortable with problem solving. And his advice to me, or his belief, was always the person who can resolve the most conflict, or the person who can overcome the most conflicts the quickest, usually comes out the leader. And so for me, that's always been one of the ways I look at my career. And it's been really important in terms of building some of these partnerships. I know a lot of times people ask me, how did you do that? We've been talking about this for a long time. How did you do that? And for me, it's always, how do we resolve the conflicts that are stopping something from moving forward? And how do we make sure we resolve that conflict in a way that it actually helps everyone involved in that discussion? And so that's allowed us to build partnerships that maybe didn't get built in the past, or even to look at partnerships that people maybe didn't even look at in the past. Is just where's the conflict and how do we remove the conflict and how do we make this work for everybody? I believe there's always a way if everybody's willing. And that's created a lot of these really interesting partnerships that we have and a lot of these programs that we're working on now.
So important for success and collaboration. For employers who are struggling to find workers, what do you say? How do you figure that out?
Yeah.
What advice can you give us?
Yeah. So, at least within our industry, the work we're doing with the Maine Construction Academy is producing a significant number of people ready for apprenticeship. And so, a couple of pieces of advice that I have for those struggling to find workforce is one, consider hiring somebody that doesn't have the skills you need and consider helping them learn those skills, right? We're seeing when there's a true commitment to apprenticeship as a process from both the employer standpoint and the individual entering the industry, we can see significant success. Apprentices stay longer, they are more productive members of your organization. So don't be afraid of that. I think apprenticeship sometimes scares, especially smaller companies. I think we don't have the infrastructure or the capacity to do that. You do, right? So AGC is here to act as an intermediary and help you navigate the Department of Labor requirements. The community colleges are here to help with that RTI or related technical instruction that's needed. And we are here to help you build a system that works for your company. So if you're sitting there going, I just can't find people, AGC and this partnership that we're building, the partnership with the CTEs and the community colleges, is so important to that, the solution to that problem. And we're willing to work with you. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It is, yes, AGC is a member-based organization and we serve our members, but we also invite others to join us. I think be willing to think outside the box, be willing to hire people and train them. And we have to think about things differently. We just have to. You can't throw up a job and think that you're going to have 25 people knocking on your door. You got to find a pipeline, and we are building that pipeline right now. I expect in 2026, we're going to see somewhere in the numbers of 300 students go through our Maine Construction Academy. And if even half of them are interested in continuing in construction, we're still talking about 150 people that are interested in a future career. So the people are out there. We just got to make the connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, I really appreciate you coming on the Maine Ideas podcast. I really appreciate your leadership, collaboration, and partnership. You're making a difference for the industry and for those folks that are looking for opportunities with your members and others, because I know you don't just just restrict your work to just members. You've broadened that tent, and I really want to thank you on the behalf of a training partner with you. So it's good to see you, and I look forward to our continued connections in the future.
Thank you so much for having me on this conversation, and thank you for your continued partnership.
Thank you for listening. And if you'd like to learn more about the Harold Alphon Center for the Advancement of Maine, please visit mccs.me.edu. And if you'd like to learn more about today's guests, be sure to check out our show notes for links and additional resources.